Meeting starting. We have a complete quorum here, all 5 of us, and it's past 7 because we heard the bells. So let's go. The first order of business is residents' concerns. And as a reminder, we're going to have a 2-minute limit. I got my little timer here. It lasts a minute. So at the end of a minute, I'll turn it back over again. When you see me obnoxiously turn the timer over, that means you're about a minute in and you got a minute left. We'd especially like to hear comments about things that aren't on the agenda, but it's open if anyone's got anything to say.
Good evening, Madeline Cruz, Station Way. I haven't been able to write to any of you regarding your goal settings, long-term, short-term, and I would like to publicly just acknowledge that we had quite a few warrant articles that passed a town meeting, and I know that they're non-binding, but I would like the select board to look into each and one of them and remember renters when you set your goal-setting meetings. Don't forget about us, please. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe we have one person online, Matt?
Yes, Mr. Chair, my apologies. Martin Benson?
Go for it. Now, Marty, you won't be able to see this as well unless you have your screen on, but.
Oh, I can see it.
Oh, great. Okay, good.
Oh, no, I can't see it, but no, I can't see that little thing. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Oh, God, never. Well, we'll work it out. Good evening, Martin Benson, 21 Deacon Drive. First, the chair's decision to implement a 2-minute time limit per speaker during public comment should be reconsidered. Historically, the select board has not implemented a time limit. Over the last year, the current chair on numerous occasions made recommendations on how the board could limit negative comments from the public. The recent SJC decision in the Barron case outlawed the practice which he suggested. The only other way to limit comments he wishes not to hear is by implementing a time limit. The removal of this guardrail is dangerous and limits all views from being heard. Secondly, the board's response to Ms. Hogseth's public comment at the last meeting was out of line, demeaning, and potentially violated the open meeting law. During public comment, Ms. Hogseth noted her objection to the recreational department's upcoming drag show during the Pride celebration at Nara Park. In her comments, she did not object to the celebration of Pride, nor did she attack the LGBTQ community. She simply noted her objection to the town's organization and promotion of a show for families which is highly sexual in nature and includes performers with names such as On Your Knees, Cervix, and Lana backwards. If anyone attempts to try to spell the word Lana backwards, they will realize that there is merit to support Ms. Hogseth's argument. Immediately after she spoke, she was attacked in public comments by a group of far-left bullies who show up to these meetings anytime they believe someone needs to be canceled or maliciously silenced. Without taking a moment to consider Ms. Hogseth's argument, they immediately accused her of attacking and trying to, quote, erase, end quote, the LGBT community, which she in no way did. It's also ironic because during the discussion regarding the retirement of the colonial mascot, the argument was made by some of the same speakers that if even one person was offended by the mascot, then it needed to be retired. However, this rule apparently doesn't apply both ways. Then, during the chair update and member minute, both the chair and Mr. Martin used their time to respond and further attack Ms. Hogseth. It was quite patriarchal and condescending for 2 white men in positions of power and privilege to tell a woman how she should feel on this issue. Further, neither the drag show or the Pride Festival was listed on the agenda for the last meeting, and thus these members potentially violated the open meeting law when they commented on this issue. The member minute was created so members could update the town as to what they are presently working on and not for the purpose of responding to public comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Marty. Is there other public comment? Oh, great.
Yes,
one more
there's
online.
one more online. Nihan Datar?
Yeah. Hi, thank you. I've already sent an email to the select board and to the moderator, and my point is about changing the structure of town meeting from a Monday, Tuesday thing to start on a Sunday at noontime and optionally have a Monday as a second day. It's going to be much more convenient to a larger number of people who work on weekdays and who may be tired or who have other commitments on a weekday evening. And the Sunday noon start, you could have a longer meeting that could go on for more than 3 or 4 hours and can accommodate a lot more people. And my recommendation is that the unimportant stuff like consent agendas and citizens petitions, non-binding petitions be moved to the second day, and the first day be mainly the important things like school budget the municipal budget and, things of broad interest to a lot of people, the important things. So then we can attend, because otherwise some of us who have to wake up early the next morning, we can't stay, and we can't encourage our friends to come and vote either because they have to go to work the next day. So please consider starting the meeting on Sunday at noon, a longer meeting on Sunday, and a second day if needed for the less important things on Monday evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Nijan. Any other public comment? No? Okay. Chair update. Let's see what we got here. Memorial Day. That was a great day. We had all 5 select board members there. 3 of us were allowed to participate. That's as many as they wanted participating, but we were all there, and it's a beautiful day, great turnout. Just really happy about how that turned out, and thank everybody who worked on that. All I had to do was show up and mumble a few words. Matt, I'm curious, how many people are online? 6.
There are 6, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. So it's a pretty small night. We had 6 people online and 4 people here. Okay, just wanted people to know the lay of the land as far as public participation goes. I wanted to announce that at a future meeting, we don't exactly know when yet, I'm going to bring back an agenda item. I'm going to bring an agenda item about the proposed expansion at Hanscom Field to add about 3 dozen extra private jet hangars, and talk about the implications of that for climate change and whether we want to comment on it. What else? Oh, yeah. One of the things I've been working on with John is various ways of creating more transparency about, about what the chair and the manager are up to and what the select board is up to. And he talked me down from a too elaborate idea about taking the letters, the responses to letters that I send, and putting them in PDF files and sticking them in a DocuShare folder where the other select board members could look at them. And way too much work for very little gain. So instead, what we're going to do is, I'm just going to reiterate that if anyone is curious on the board about response I've made to a letter that's come in, just please contact me. I'm very happy to share those with folks. If you have any questions or if you want to add something, do feel free to contact me. What else? Last one. In terms of working with me as chair, people should know that I have a mild to moderate case of ADHD. And the reason I mention that is that there are some ways in which the board could be helpful, or the board should at least be aware of things. So first of all, if you see me say that I'm going to do something and you don't see me writing it down, it's always in order to ask, Jim, did you write that down? Because sometimes I forget and then things disappear. What else? Please, when you're contacting me, I think most of you do this, but occasionally, people should contact me on the actonma.gov email rather than any of my myriad personal emails, because that's the one where I'm going to be, keeping track of making sure that I respond to things. My personal email, like many of you, but especially for those of us with ADHD, is a wild mess where things go and disappear. What else? If you do write to me and you don't hear back from me, don't assume that I'm just ignoring you. Feel free to, write again or text me and say, hey, what's up? Are you there? What do you think? Those are all my updates. Town manager update.
Thank you. I wanted to announce that today our new police chief was sworn in, James Cogan. James Cogan has been serving as interim for the last 6 months or so. He has been a deputy since 2017, and he's been with the police department since 1984. And we're really excited. I'm really excited to get working and started with him. We are planning some community engagement events to introduce him to the community in this summer. So.
Great. Anything else? No. Great. Thank you. we're already running ahead of the informal schedule that I wrote down, so that's good. Update on, the next agenda item, number 3, is called Update on Regional Housing Services Office and Approve Intermunicipal Agreement. John, could... Of course I am. I'm sorry, Liz. Luckily, David has reminded me that we have one other piece of business. Thank you. Member minutes. Maybe members want to say some things. I hope they do. Let's start on the left and work our way down.
Thank you. I just wanted to congratulate several awardees of Middlesex West Chamber of Commerce Awards. Here in Acton, Saad Dino of Acton Pharmacy, Julie Pierce, our Economic Development Director, Carla Stover of Enterprise Bank, Lester Gould of Gould's Distinctive Clothing, Justin Bastinelli of KJ's Cafe, Anita Optiz of Anita's Shoe Boutique, and Katie Neville, who lives in Boxborough but works for Acton Boxborough United Way. So congratulations to all of those awardees. And I also wanted to remind everyone that both libraries are going to summer hours. The Citizens Library began their summer hours on June 1st. They're open Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And Memorial will go to summer hours on June 18th, and they'll be open Monday through Saturday. And finally, the Acton Boxborough Cultural Council is looking for new members. So you can find out more at their website, actonboxboroughculturalcouncil.org. Thanks.
I just wanted to let everybody know that the town has an energy coaching program. It's done under the auspices of Energize Acton, along with Abode and the town sustainability department. Anybody in town can, if they're thinking about electrifying their house so they can make a carbon-free home, can request that an energy coach come to their house and, get them started with that process. There's been 60, 70 people in town that have done that so far. So if you're interested, I will ask that the link to the description of the program and the link to sign up be included in the minutes for this meeting.
Thanks, David. And David, by the way, is one of the star coaches.
Jim is the other star coach. No, they're actually, Jim and I are both coaches, and there are, I think, 9 of us.
Yeah.
And we've all been trained by Abode.
To piggyback on what Alyssa said about committees needing members, specifically the Human Services Committee most recently lost several members. There was a mass exodus. The chair and 2 members decided not to continue on. So I would love outreach and to have any interested folks, please contact me. We would love to fill the empty seats.
So the news from Community Preservation Committee, all of the award letters that were sent out were approved under Article 9 of the town meeting. Those letters were approved last week and have been sent out. And 250 committee, we've still got a few more days for people to submit their suggested logos. Consult the town website on that. And our history subcommittee has been hard at work lining up speakers. We do have at least one firm commitment. And we hope to be able to roll out the full suite of what we've got planned probably in early September. Thank you.
Okay. I've practiced this once, I'll try it again. Now we're moving on to item 3, update on Regional Housing Services Office and approve intermunicipal agreement. John, can you introduce Liz and tell us what we're doing tonight?
Thank you. Before us is Liz Rust, who is the Executive Director of the Regional Housing Services Office. It's a pretty innovative 10-town collaboration to help provide support to our organization, and we're up for a renewal and it'd be a it's a good opportunity for Liz to talk a little bit about what the program is, generally and specifically about the renewal process. So there is a brief presentation, which I'll be bringing up right now.
Great, thank you, John. Yep, hi, I'm Liz Rust. I'm the Director of the Regional Housing Services Office, and glad to be here. I sometimes come at the end of the year or the beginning of the fiscal year to do this renewal, and as John mentioned, to give you an update on the RHSO, or maybe it's new for new board members. So you have the slides. I don't know, do you see those slides? Like where you? Oh, you see them right there. I was going to say, like, you're looking there, like, aren't you looking here? No, that's where I look, right? You can, yeah. So today we'll talk about the leadership, oversight, and management, a little bit of the review, and then the year ahead and sort of an overall summary. So this is the service model. So this year, there are 10 communities. This year we've added Natick in as a 10th community. So I think we're delighted to expand. The IMA was originally set up as a 9-community, so we've expanded that this year, and that's really due to both their interest in strengthening their affordable housing and our staffing and ability to handle more communities. So everyone pays in to the revolving fund that the town of Concord manages for the RHSO, and then we all work for Concord. So Concord handles all of the contracting and the administrative activities relative to the office, and all the member communities who buy in for a certain number of hours, a certain amount of support. And so it's an easy procurement model. So many times for these kinds of things, you have to do RFPs or go out and find this. So this is pretty easy. You just decide how much support you get, and you just get those services without having to do any procurement. Especially, and that's really due to the intermunicipal agreement, which has special procurement provisions. In terms of how the RHSO is organized and managed, so the lead community, Concord, has the overall management. We have an annual meeting with the town managers and administrators, and we have an advisory committee that meets quarterly. So that's how the overall RHSO is handled. Of course, each town has their own management of the projects and activities, and that's handled on a one-on-one basis. The IMA is a 3-year term, and we're just starting the next 3-year cycle coming up. And it was designed so that it amends every year to give you the opportunity to hear from me on an annual basis. And it's really a proactive model. It's really designed so that every community actively signs on every year. And that's done by including the budget in the IMA so that it has to be amended every year. So that's why that was done. It was done intentionally to make it a proactive model. And then there's the budget process. So that really starts really in August. I mean, Concord's the very first community that puts in their CPA requests for the RHSO fee. Most of the communities, I think, 8 of the current 9, and Natick will be a little different, funds through the CPA. And their CPA applications are due September 8th, if you can believe that, for their Springtown meeting. It's really quite early. And so that the budget is really 2 parts. How many hours do you want to buy? And then what does each hour cost on a very simple basis? So our hourly rate goes up a little bit, and then how many hours you want to buy really varies depending on what your work plan looks like. Acton's been very stable for many years now. And then, as you know, the town would make budget requests, be it CPC articles and other appropriations, and then we invoice in July for all the payments. So all the money comes in, and that's how, where purchase orders and contracts are made available for the staff. So that's kind of how the whole thing works. So this is the really busy work plan slide. So we really have 6 areas of functional program or, support services that we provide. One is the ownership monitoring. So we have, almost 350 units, of which Acton has 73. We do annual certifications for those, so I try to intersperse like the Acton-specific information there. And 95% response rate on the Acton certification, so that's very good, higher than our average, which is 93 on a, pretty much standard basis. This also includes refinancing, capital improvements, resales. I think Acton had a couple of resale units already in this, fiscal year, right? And then we have rental monitoring for the LIP units, so there's a number of things there. Rental reviews, we do the monitoring for the Avalon project, as well as some of the other pieces. And then we run program support. We run rental assistance programs, home program, which is the home consortium, which Acton's not a member of, and small grants programs, as well as rental assistance. I think I mentioned that, right? Mortgage assistance and rental assistance. We administered Acton's rental assistance program for some time, but not currently. And then the inventory management, of course, we keep track of all of your affordable units and their affordability and their compliance thereof. And then we have what we call RHSO programming. So that's a website, property managers, training, workshops. We've just finished in the spring a tenant services workshop, tenant legal services, as well as a homeowner training, both for direct for tenants and homeowners. And we do some work with property managers there. And then this other area is local board support. So this would be really anything, any kind of new projects. Here for Acton, it would be support for the ACHC. We do the agendas and the minutes and provide staff assistance there. We're doing some work to help do feasibility for a rehab trust that you're probably familiar with. Just recently reviewing some information on the Parker Street project. And those are just some sort of recent examples, but any kind of thing that comes up for that. So that's kind of the nature of the work, and the hours are really, oriented towards each of those, slices there. So in terms of our goals, these are pretty standard. We really support you at whatever level that you are interested in. So the RHSO support looks different for every community that we're involved with. Some is a very deep level, and we do a lot of sort of staff assistance, and some is very more consulting, opinion-based. What do you think about this? Can you review this piece? And anything in between. So it really depends on what the goals of the town are, housing-wise, and how we might best be able to help with those goals. We support the resident, the owners, and the tenants, staff boards and committees, as it says here, right, local projects, and staff, property managers, and residents, right? So it's a pretty broad support, and it can be, as I say, whatever works for you. We think that the cornerstone or the core services really are around compliance monitoring and inventory management, because that's really the key to make sure that the affordable housing that you have in place stays affordable and stays compliant. And other than that, I think that the services can work for whatever the town's looking for. And then, of course, we want to maintain our office, offering workshops and training, website and outreach. We've started to do a monthly newsletter. We want to continue to promote the RHSO model. We think this is very effective for municipalities. It's very hard to get the technical expertise to buy into that without having to procure your own consultant or your own staff. And even then, it was started, I think that there was a number of towns who had a consultant, very expert consultant, but that person went on to get another job. And then it was Bedford, and they're like, well, now what? This person knew all of our inventory and all that. So it was sort of a single point of expertise that they were looking more for a broader support than them. But we think it's a valuable and helpful, and we always sort of strive to keep it that way. We want to make it useful and valuable to you. It's always optional. We've had communities terminate from the RHSO and then, or withdraw is probably a better word, and then join and withdraw and rejoin, or new communities coming in. So, there's always options. And then, of course, structural support and staffing. So, we are just people too. So we want to make sure that we have proper backup for all of our staff, and that we maintain the office so that it continues no matter what happens, as life moves on. And that might be kind of the overview, right? Is that it? There might be, oh, no, here we go. Yeah, it's a very busy slide. So this is all the numbers and the information that you might be interested in. So here was the FY23, the year that we're just finishing, and you can see what's been committed to for next year. And you can see a few more hours allocated to Acton in FY24, and a little bit more money. And you can see Acton comprises 10% of the RHSO total pot. And which is, a good number with the 10 communities, so that would be like right on target there. Excuse me. Sudbury is high with 23%, and Natick at 6%, Maynard just 3%. So you can see there's a real range of services there. Now, of course, those are smaller communities also. And then you can see the expenses are really essentially all staffing. There's a small amount of program expense, and Concord has some administrative expense for the rent and the cleaning of the office and the IT technical support that they provide. And this is the 12th year for the RHSO, so it's been quite a while now, I think it's very successful because of the commitment of the senior leadership. So this is not something that was sort of ground up. It was really the town managers looking to help have assistance for their affordable housing in towns. And I think that keeping it fresh that way and keeping it proactive in terms of coming to all the boards every year for signing on keeps it sort of front and center and makes sure that we're addressing whatever your key priorities are. So we think it's a proactive compliance monitoring, it's resource efficiency, and it's a regional approach. I think that all of those are the three takeaways that are very effective with this kind of model. And so we're really pleased to offer you the opportunity to sign up again for the next IMA circuit.
Thanks so much. There might be questions, and then at some point, we're going to put a motion on the table about continuing the support. But I'm happy to start off with any, overall questions people might have about the RHSO and Acton's connection with it. Any questions?
Thanks. Thank you so much. I'm pretty familiar with RHSO because I served on the Community Preservation Committee, and that's where Acton's funding comes from. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for the services, the critical services that have been provided by the office, because this compliance monitoring and inventory management is key to keeping our units on the subsidized housing inventory. I just have a basic question and a couple that are more philosophical. I'm wondering, this is the basic question, the workshops that are available to all communities, and I attended that renter services workshop that was online, how are those billed? Because the billing is divided up into the hours for each community, so something that's available to all of the communities, how is that billed? Is that a separate additional fee?
It's billed equally to all communities. So as we build the number of hours for each community, there's the local support, which varies, the monitoring, which we know from the kind of inventory that there is, and then there's the administrative, and everyone shares equally on the administration, and everyone shares equally on the regional support. So no matter how big the community, and I think it's maybe 30 hours of regional support for each community. So something like that, but so everyone pays equally for all of those.
Okay, great. So actually, I guess this is not really philosophical. Looking at the fee schedule for FY24, it looks like dividing out the number of hours is about an $84 an hour cost. But I noticed that the increase of 35 hours over FY23 was more than that. It was about $142 an hour. And I'm just wondering, that additional increase, is that due to your increased cost, inflation, that sort of thing? So
It's a hard question when I don't have my, like, computer here to kind of figure that out. But you can see on the budget number right here, so for FY '24, our billable rate is $83.80,
Okay, yeah.
right? And so,
So that additional 35 hours that we're increasing over the last fiscal year
Yeah.
was roughly $5,000, which is just, it's higher, and I was just wondering
well,
why
all
that
of your
is.
477 hours are billed at this 83.80.
Okay. So they could be program costs or contract, or, you can get back to me, since you don't have your
Program or,
computer.
I just want to understand the question when you say program, cost, or contract?
Well, what we were just talking about earlier, how there are additional costs that are divided equally among the various
Oh, you want
communities.
the breakout of the 477 hours in terms of how they're broken down?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
I wouldn't ask that of you. You can get back to me later. It was just something that I noticed in the table.
Sure.
Okay.
And, yeah, I'm glad you have my email, so be sure to follow up with me.
Okay.
Put everything.
So I'm assuming that, the assumption, I love when the town works regionally, collaboratively with other communities. So the assumption is that we're saving money, and we also have the security with the knowledge base staying intact. Like you mentioned, someone left, that single person. So this provides continuity. And I'm just wondering if you can speak a little bit more to how the town saves money by doing this work regionally, because it looks like in our 477 hours, it's about 10 hours a week. So I'm just thinking about the cost relative to the cost of hiring a consultant.
Sure. So for 40,000, in my personal opinion, I mean, you could always go test this, of course, that you could not hire anyone for $40,000 with the technical expertise that you're getting between all the people in our office. So not only do you get my expertise, but we have Laura Plaskin in the office who does all the resident services, and she's been doing that for 15 years, starting in Cambridge. Our rental specialist ran leasing, Section 8 leasing for the Somerville Housing Authority for many years and comes very well qualified. And then we have someone with land use planning who was a planner in a neighboring town for 20 years. So you're buying a little slice of those very skilled people versus trying to find one person who might have all those backgrounds, which is very difficult. You're not going to find someone who has the homeowner training or homeowner expertise, the rental leasing and, compliance, as well as the management and the land use planning. So you'd have to, approximate that in one person. And the other part of it is it's really, it's so part-time that it's hard to find someone who wants to do this kind of, I'm not gonna call it bit work, but it's kind of bit work, right? Like, it's just like a little, like, I wanna work 10 hours a week for some community, but really treat you like you're my only client, right? Like, we try to do that. We try to treat every town like they're the only one, right? So that we know all about your programs and your inventory, even though we're only working, 10% of our time for you. So I think that would be very hard to replicate with any single individual, be it, with the technical expertise, I don't think that you can bring that in on the municipal pay structure, because I know that I tried to do that, be on the municipal pay structure, and it doesn't really, come out right with the steps and everything, right? So, and then on the consulting side, I think it's the blending of skills in that person.
Okay, thank you. I just think it's really important for the public to understand that. And I figured it was diversity of skills and a variety of people. Appreciate that.
I don't have a question, but I think I can clarify your concern. Liz, you can correct me if I'm wrong. In addition to the increase in hours for Acton, there's an increase in the hourly rate?
That's correct, both.
Right, so-
There's 35 increases, and our hourly rate went from $79.14 to $83.80.
And so that increase for all the hours went into that big
That's
chunk?
exactly it. Yes, thank you. Does that answer your question? Yes. Thank you.
I don't know if this is a question for you or for John, but I'm just curious about, so we've been having these conversations about, providing better services for renters. We have some money for it. We have a goal about it. And I just was wondering about the overlap between the kind of service gaps we're trying to fill and the kind of services that RHSO has to offer, just so we sort of understand the lay of what we might be getting into. If either of you wants to comment on that.
I'll start, and then I'll turn it over to John. So as I mentioned, so we're always interested in helping the town achieve their goals, and in this particular area, we've had some conversations with John and his staff about what those gaps might be and how we might help. I think when we probably haven't talked for some time in any detail, but the town was exploring a little bit more detail about what those gaps were and really what some of the options were. We floated it by the other communities, and there weren't other communities in the RHSO who were particularly interested in this area. So, because we were exploring whether that would be part of the regional services that would be billed uniformly across the board, and I don't think that we're able to go there yet. They wanted to kind of see what transpired. We were able to make some, progress down this way with the webinar that we offered with Metro West Legal Services to see what kind of response we got, to see what kind of questions people were asking, to further open the door to see if we could provide some assistance. And we're certainly willing to hear more of how we might help the town and how that might be effective.
John, anything to add?
Yeah, the RHSO is a very valuable member of the team that we have as we're trying to figure out what this pilot program looks like later this summer. So we'll continue to be in touch.
Great, thanks. My last question was, as you mentioned the rehab trust and that you've been, asked to do an analysis of the financial analysis of that. And I was wondering where we were at in that process?
Yes, thanks for asking that. So I think we met back in April, maybe it was, and mapped out sort of a timeline. We were first looking at what kind of entity might be involved in actually setting up a new trust or using the Acton Housing Authority or some of that, because that's such an influencing factor in how any program would go forward, irrespective of what it was actually doing, right? Like you need to have an entity that has the powers to hold the money to transact the business. So we made some good progress on that. Then we were going to look into the expense side and then the revenue side and put that together. So we're a little off. I'd probably say like we're about a month off on our work towards that. We have been looking at all of the condominiums, which was the target properties that were listed for sale over the last 2.5 years. So doing some analysis of that. So we got that listing from our MLS contacts. And actually, it was really just 2022 to 2023, so probably 1.5 years, of which there were 107 condominiums sold under $400,000. So if you look at like just trying to understand what the target properties would be, and not going back too far because the market has changed so much, so we don't want to skew like what the sales data was 3 years ago, because we go like, well, is that really relevant today? So the bulk of those, like half of them, were in the $200,000 to $300,000 range. So just trying to get that, because your major cost is going to be the acquisition of property. And then we're also working with a couple of housing authorities in the area to see what renovations cost them, because it's not just what renovations would cost us as private owners, right, because of the public, procurement and public construction. So trying to get, what does a new bathroom cost? What do new floors cost? So we can say, maybe 1 in 5 units might need a new bathroom, or to make some assessment about that. It's certainly not every property would need that, but those are sort of the layers of the expenses. And we found that a big chunk of the costs, as we thought, were going to be the condominium fees. So in terms of ongoing operations, so in doing this analysis of the MLS listing, the average condominium fee was $466, which is high, for like a $200,000, condominium, right? So that's really going to eat into that rent and the carrying costs. So again, not till we had that data could we start to understand that. And as we expected, these are small units, so even over the 1-2 bedrooms, the average square footage was 875. So, but that's what we expected, and the average age was 1971 built, so we're talking like 50-year-old condominiums. So no surprises there, but we have the data so now that we can start to build that up. So that's kind of where we are.
I really appreciate the update. Thanks so much for working on that.
Sure.
You asked my question, and thank you so much, Liz.
Sure.
Does someone want to look at the packet and see if there's a motion in there that we might want to consider? Or is it on a slide or something? Okay, Alyssa,
I move that the town of Acton approve the new intermunicipal agreement. Is that right? IMA? As for the Regional Housing Services Office and authorize the town manager to execute the agreement.
is there a second?
Second.
There might be more discussion. There might be questions or comments from the public. Any more comments from the board? Any more comments from the public? No? Well, then let's vote on that fine motion. All those in favor, please say yes or aye.
Aye.
Yes. All those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The next item is item 4. It's called Sewer Commissioner Business. Approve sewer rates for fiscal year '24. John, you want to introduce Ellie and what we're talking about today?
Thank you. So one of the responsibilities of the Select Board is to serve as sewer commissioners, and one of the core responsibilities of the sewer commissioners is to set the sewer rates. And we annually come to the board and ask or recommend a rate, and that's where we are tonight. I'm pleased that we're doing this in June instead of later in the summer, which is what we did the last 2 years, and I appreciate Ellie Anderson's work in helping moving that along. This is Ellie Anderson from the Finance Office.
Good evening. Good to see all of you again. As John said, I'm Ellie Anderson. I serve as the Finance Solutions Analyst in the Finance Department. I also work with a number of town departments on a number of projects. It will have been a year for me with the town this upcoming July. Very exciting. So why are we here? As John said, the Finance Department is responsible for calculating and recommending sewer usage rates to the sewer commissioners each year. These rates are a product of analysis of the Sewer Enterprise Fund, as well as the next year operating budget. Today, we're looking to set rates for fiscal year 2024. So when looking at the budget for rate setting purposes in fiscal year 2024, we really honed in on the operating budget. The operating budget represents the annual cost to run the sewer system, and those costs include things like salary, contractual services, electricity, and so on. And then when we're comparing fiscal year 2024 to fiscal year 2023, we're seeing a monetary increase of about $60,000 in those costs, which comes out to a percentage increase of just around 6%. So to cover those operating costs, the Finance Department recommends the following rates. For residential customers, we recommend a rate of $0.1517 per cubic foot. This is about an 8.9% increase over fiscal year 2023's rate. And then for commercial and school customers, we recommend a rate of $0.2141 per cubic foot, which is an 8.1% increase over last year's rate. So to translate these increases into dollars and cents and to put them into perspective, if those rates were enacted, we'd be looking at an estimated increase for the average single-family residential customer of about $6.32 per month. And then for the average commercial customer, we're estimating around $40. So how are these rates calculated? We started with the operating budget, as I showed on a couple of slides previous, and then we estimated what we could expect for volume or cubic feet of flow entering the sewer plant in fiscal year 2024. That 6.3 million cubic foot figure represents a 1% increase over what we anticipated in fiscal year 2023, and that's attributed to the connection of the apartment complex on Mass Ave at Tavernier Place, which is slated to occur around the start of the fiscal year. So to get the uniform rate, we simply divided the operating budget by the estimated volume. But as we know, we don't bill at a uniform rate. We have a different rate for residential customers, and then we have a different rate for commercial and school customers. It's about a 30% shift from residential to the school and commercial classes. So when that shift is applied, we get the rates that I presented on the previous slide. So why these rates in particular? These rates cover the cost to operate the sewer system in fiscal year 2024. The cost to operate and the revenue that would come in are completely equal. And then additionally, implementing a methodology like this would help the sewer enterprise to work towards fiscal policies and a rate model which encompasses all operating and capital costs. So that's all I have for you. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I'll bet you there's questions. Where are we starting? No? Alyssa?
Thank you. Thank you, Ellie. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more about that last statement about moving towards a fiscal policy and rate model that allows us to incorporate capital improvements as well as operating costs, because it sounds like to me that we are taking the operational costs, dividing it by the anticipated flow, and like you said, the costs are exactly equal to the revenue in. So where does that leave us for replacing parts and roofs and other upgrades and capital improvements that are necessary?
So what I was getting to with that is that essentially the prior approach to rate setting was to consider a whole bunch of factors, but ultimately it was kind of dealt with on a case-by-case basis and didn't really follow like a set standardized approach to rate setting. So what enacting these rates would do this year is it would put our operating cost and our revenue in balance, which would then allow us to consider some sort of planning model or retained earnings policy or capital plan moving forward. So this is kind of the first step in thinking about all of those other things, because we'll be coming at it from a place of balance.
So thank you for that. Does that mean for the past couple of decades, the rates have not been set so that the revenue coming in is sufficient to cover the operating costs?
So as Ellie mentioned, she hasn't approached the 1-year mark, so I'll take that one. I just passed my 5-year mark. I think my understanding of the past 20 years or so is that the rates were set to run the system based on the best information they had available at the time and the concerns about increases. There was many years where the rates were flat, didn't increase at all. And I suspect that the cost to run probably didn't remain flat. It was just a decision made at the time. And so I think in the last few years, we've been trying to better align the actual costs with the actual rates. And I think this year we're there, which is good news.
Yeah, we'll look forward to making progress on bringing the capital expenses in. You know, I mean, we just lived through trying to do an upgrade.
So I want to say that when, for big capital, we borrow for that, and the debt service is an operating expense. Right, and so I think what, Ellie, correct me if I'm wrong, when she talked about, you know, maybe increasing retained earnings, it's a way to kind of save for those ahead of time, but the capital becomes operating.
That's so much more reassuring. Thank you. Oh, here's a motion here. Request that the sewer, so I will make this motion since it's right in front of my eyes. Oh, and it's probably right there too. Bingo. Move to approve the FY 2024 sewer rates as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any more discussion by the board about this? Any comments from the public? No, seeing none, let's go ahead and vote, say yes or aye if you're in favor of this motion. Yes?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Got rate set.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. The next item is called Item 5, Public Shade Tree Removal, 87 Hayward Road. And there's a link for a lot more information. John, can you introduce us to this?
Yes, so typically when a project for tree removal goes before the planning board, if a member of the public raises an objection, then it gets brought to the select board, which is where we are tonight. So the details about the project are in the packet. I know that our tree warden is here, Ryan Hunt. I saw him earlier. I'd actually like to add him as a panelist. Oh, yes, thank you.
And before we go too much further, I see Dean has an urgent thing to say before we go any further.
I will recuse myself as a select board member from this discussion, as I am a direct abutter to the Hart's property. I will, however, retain my right to speak from the floor as a resident.
We'll miss you, Dean.
So, Ryan, could you please provide us an update on what we're discussing tonight? Thanks.
Sure. So basically, the short story is Hart's approached me. They wanted to redo a bunch of the landscaping along Hayward Road, and they requested taking down a bunch of trees that are between the stone wall and the pavement, which is within the public right-of-way. And it's a scenic road, so it went through the planning board, and like you said, it got objected, so that's why we're here tonight. I believe it's 4 of the trees. I did tree risk assessments on them, and they're a risk to the road and to the public, so they don't need permission for those, but 4 of them I couldn't find anything wrong with, so they're looking for permission to remove 4 oak trees. And they've come up with a plan, a re-landscaping plan that I'm very happy with, and they're willing to plant 22 3-inch, which are almost fairly large landscape trees, and they're willing to do the cost of the removals and the stump grinding and everything else for the project. So they're hoping for approval of removing the 4 oak trees.
Thanks, Ryan. There might be questions from the board. David.
Thank you, Ryan. I noticed in some of the materials, I'm sorry, I read them yesterday, that you had said some of these trees had some, I forget the wordings you used, as some unfortunate trimming in the past. And I want to just understand, you also said that you didn't find anything wrong with 4 of the trees. Does not finding anything wrong include bad trimming, or is that when you say you didn't find anything wrong, I assume you meant the tree is healthy, alive, but maybe doesn't take into account the bad trimming? Anyway, if you could just clarify that.
That's correct. With the tree risk assessment, I'd have to find something that would lead me to believe that it would fail prematurely, or that it had a disease, or it was decayed, or was a risk of falling over. These don't technically have that. They are very poorly trimmed. As far as I understand, they were already mature trees that got trimmed to run the wires, which is to take large limbs off of a tree is very bad for its health. So, but yes, I couldn't find anything as an immediate risk to the public with them. But that doesn't take into consideration that they're, hitting trucks on the way by and impeding a little bit of visibility and stuff like that. It's just a strictly health form,
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I will say that on some of these trees, the limbs are quite horizontal, and they reach out pretty far, and so there's going to be a heavy snow load on them after some snowstorms, and some of those are over the street. So I'll just leave that out there.
Thank you. So I went to the public shade tree policy that was adopted in 2021 to look and see what details I could find there. And I did notice that a previous board had adopted a 2-for-1 inches replacement. So my question is why the planning board had approved the proposal. Well, first of all, let me say that I really appreciate that the Hearts Corporation worked so closely with the tree warden and went through a very thorough process where there was a lot of communication. And I do agree that the trees are unsightly, badly pruned, and, a hazard to trucks that go by. Of course, maybe we could leave them there to discourage trucks from traveling down Hayward. So I'm just wondering why the proposal to only replace 66 inches rather than 182 inches was approved by the planning board. And I also just wanted to make a note that in the public shade tree policy that was adopted, there is a statement that trees that are less than 5 inches in diameter are, in the opinion of the tree warden, of no significant value. And I understand that that refers to a tree that is going to be removed, but I'm wondering why it doesn't apply to trees that are going to be planted as replacements, why a 3-inch diameter tree is acceptable instead of at least 5-inch diameter tree with that statement in the policy.
I can answer some of that. The reason for it actually works out to be almost a 1-to-1 replacement for the inches for Hearts. And a lot of it is because the policy was, the tree removal policy is mostly, the way I see it, is geared towards builders that come in and want to build something for profit. Hearts is doing it. They technically don't have to. They can leave all those trees on the side of the road and do their landscaping plan and be done with it. And the town wouldn't get anything out of it. And Hearts would still get their landscaping plan, but they're trying to do the right thing, which is why I don't want to say we're being more lenient, but I think a 1-to-1 would be acceptable because they're not doing it for a profit. They're doing it as an in-kind thing for the town and to beautify Hayward Road where everybody comes for sports games and stuff like that. So I think that's where the leniency should be. And obviously there's been tons of meetings about it and lots of discussion. And like I said in my letter, they approached us, a lot of people, a lot of builders, again, Hearts could have done it without talking to me because they don't need to do anything on the town side of the stone wall. So that's where I think the leniency comes in. And as far as the significant 5-inch tree, very few 5-inch trees are planted. Nurseries don't stock them. They're very hard to find, very expensive. When you're planting a smaller than 5-inch tree, you have more of a chance to prune it while it's young and get it to be the right shape for its location. And there's just a better chance of it surviving. It doesn't need quite as much water, doesn't need quite as much care as planting a very large. 5-inch tree is a very large tree. And as far as why the policy didn't consider it that way, I'm not quite sure.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so Ryan, I wonder if you could sort of take us through the math, because here's what I'm doing. I'm taking the 4 oak trees that are not, in trouble, 26, 21, 21, and 23. I'm thinking that adds up to 91. And the 22 3-inch trees, seems like that's 22 times 3 is 66. So it doesn't even seem like we're doing 1-to-1. But maybe I'm doing the math wrong.
That's, again, they came up with the 22 trees themselves. That's a lot of trees to fit in an area. I was actually surprised they were willing to plant that many back. That's a lot of good sized trees. So again, it's more of being leniency. A little bit more math attached to that is I estimated $3,000 for the removal of the trees if they get permission. And they're also removing the hazard trees, again, that the town won't have to do, and doing the stump grinding and everything. So I estimated that at $3,000, and there's a $350 permit fee. So the value that I get from Hart's giving the town, or the value I came up with, equals $36,000, $36,300 actually. And the 1-to-1 is 45,000. So it's not exact, but I feel like it's in the ballpark.
Thanks. I'm glad we're having a tree hearing about this. Any other questions or comments from the board or from the public? Well, please introduce yourself.
Okay. Dean Charter, 81 Charter Road. I'm a direct abutter to the Hart's property. I think, and I do have some familiarity with the bylaws and with tree policy in general. I think I'll second what the tree warden has suggested. We should look at this.
Sorry, I realize I'm being awkward over here. I had a question for Dean that I wondered if I could ask right now.
Well, here he is. Go ahead.
I mean a timeout, a pause. Yes.
Okay. We're taking a brief pause while we have like policy conversations. So
Thank you.
we'll be right back.
My apologies.
Okay, let's resume.
Okay, so I think it's important to look at this as the tree warden has, as a civic beautification project. Normally, and this was the concept when we developed the policy, was, a developer comes in, needs to take down a number of trees to put in a new subdivision and sidewalks and the, intersection roundings, that sort of stuff. They have to take trees down. There's nothing that is requiring Hart's to do this. So I actually look at this particular proposal more as a donation to the town rather than as a more traditional sort of tree removal request. So I think it should be viewed in that manner. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Anything else from the audience? Yeah, I'm persuaded by the argument that this is basically a civic beautification project that's being paid for by Hearts. If there's supposed to be any, I'll leave it to the manager to figure out if this goes forward. Are they actually making a contribution, which we have to accept, and all that kind of stuff? But that's a technical detail. Right now, we're doing a tree hearing about whether the trees can be removed. Oh, another comment.
Thank you. So given that the public shade tree policy is governed by, I don't know if governed is the right word, but the idea that we need the right tree in the right place, I guess my only concern is that if you're surprised, Ryan, at the number of trees that are proposed to be planted right along Hayward Road in front of Hearts, perhaps some of the trees could be planted elsewhere. I'd leave that up to your expertise. And I guess I also want to comment that I'd rather those poorly pruned trees come down sooner and be replaced sooner so that it's not so long before we have some large, beautiful trees along Hayward rather than, I understand that this is not a replacement for the carbon sequestering capability of those large oaks. And it won't be for about 40 or 50 years, but at least that will come sooner rather than later.
Thanks for that comment. Any other comments before we take a vote? Okay. All those, do we actually have a motion in front of us? Or, David has a thought about how to do this procedurally.
I move to approve the removal of the 4 trees requested by the tree warden in front of Hearts.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say yes or aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay.
I think there implicitly, maybe there's one abstention.
Yes, we should note that Mr. Charter has abstained from voting. Thank you. Done. Come back, Dean. Ryan, thanks. Bye. Yeah, oh well.
Thank you.
Oh, good. Good, good. Okay, now we're moving to the next item, which is called number 6, Review Results of 2023 Annual Town Meeting. This will take a while, so I want to give you guys a clue about how I propose to structure this discussion. First, a round of general comments from board members on any overall comments about how the town meeting went, lessons for next time, et cetera. We're not going to make any decisions, so just hear general thoughts in case they lead to future agenda items. There might be comments from the public at this point too, although I'll note that Nijan Ditar's comment at residents' concerns fits into this category. And then we'll go through the abstract and stop at each item that fits one of 2 criteria. Either it's a regular item that didn't pass, that we might want to discuss the future of that, or a citizen's petition, because we want to, the goal of this discussion is to identify follow-ups that might need to happen. So that's the first thing, is we will hear from each, we'll hear from the select board member assigned on any thoughts about next steps. Then we'll hear from the town manager about what level of effort that might entail. So we have a clue about whether this is, big enough that we should be considering it a goal, or small enough that it's just, yeah, this is routine, it's just going to be handled as part of the regular work of the staff. We'll hear any additional comments from board members and then the public about each item. And I will steer us away from trying to relitigate any of the articles. We're just looking for next steps at this point and comments on those next steps. I'm guessing 90 minutes for this, by the way, but still gets us out of here at a reasonable hour since it's only 8:10. So,
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
please.
Am I understanding you correctly that your intent here is not to discuss items which are essentially done deals, but only with ones that are, so changes to bylaws which are now done, or approval of budgets which are now done? We're not discussing those. We're discussing those that might have, where we might want to take future action.
Right, exactly. That's a very good way of putting it.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the process before we launch down? Okay. I'm going from this fine thing in the packet called Annual Town Meeting Recap, although we also have the abstract of the town meeting, which has like all the language of the motions and the, the motions to amend and all that. So looking down here, the first one I see, whoops, wrong page. The first one I see is amend general bylaws, Board of Trustees of the West Acton Citizens Library. That was assigned to Himija, who doesn't happen to be here, so I'm going to take a first crack at it, but then we can talk about next steps. Because the vote was postponed indefinitely, but we still have a short-term goal to, have some action at a town meeting that clarifies the relationship of the West Acton Citizens Library trustees and the town of Acton. So we may want to take action on this. Might be reasonable to hear from Alyssa, who's now our liaison to the two libraries, about next steps. Got any thoughts?
Thank you. I guess I would only say that we need to take a next step. Not that that's very helpful, but that the current MO for the libraries is to follow this previous board's policy and direction, that the staff report to the town manager via the library director, and until the time that the roles of the Citizens Library trustees have been clarified. So we're still in that time period that needs to have an end. And how long that's going to take, I don't know, but we do need to still address it as a board.
Okay, so we have some possible future agenda items to address this. I'm wondering if the manager had any comments about level of effort to, come to this agreement and come back to a town meeting, if you had any sense of what that level of effort was.
So in terms of level of effort and plan to prepare for next town meeting, this is something that, with town meeting being almost a year away, it wouldn't be something that we'd be working on this summer, because it's very draining to work on this, to be honest with you. And I think the several months leading up to town meeting, I think this took up a lot of bandwidth for a lot of people. And so I'd rather not do that. If you're asking did you ask my opinion? Yeah. I'm sorry if you didn't.
It all felt in line as you were saying it, but as you asked that rhetorical question, I'm not sure. But it's helpful to know what you're describing as the level of effort is that, well, nothing now, but more later, potentially. Okay.
I guess the level of effort is solely dependent on the direction I get from the board.
Okay, so this needs to come back to the board. Other thoughts?
I just have, is it hurting the function of the Citizens Library?
Right. Are we in any sort of immediate crisis that the select board needs to act sooner rather than later?
Well, we do have a staffing shortage there. The incumbent library manager is moving on from the community. So that's not something that the select board can necessarily address, but it's all part of the issue that I think needs attention when the board feels it's appropriate to have us spend time on it.
Okay, so for now, let's, David.
So I just wanted to point out that this board has never really, it seems odd, actually, never really discussed this issue outside of selecting trustees for the West Acton Library. So, although all five of us were working separately with the town manager on this from one point of view or another, or the five board members at the time, we couldn't discuss outside, obviously, the meeting, and we didn't discuss in one of these meetings, again, except in the context of selecting the trustees. So I think that we could have that conversation at some point. I mean, maybe it should be closer to when the manager is ready to work on it. But I think it could go in some schedule sometime.
Other thoughts from other board members about next steps? Dean?
Yeah, I would second what David has said. I think there needs to be some good conversations about it. And I think these are the kind of conversations we probably need to have as the town manager starts focusing on preparing the budget for the next fiscal year. So I'm thinking this is like a conversation for late September, early October time period. Realizing that, a lot of boards and committees do take some breaks during the summer and they don't have as much chance to focus on it. But I think most anything's going to happen in either of the two libraries is going to have some impact on the budget. So we really should have those sorts of things nailed down earlier in the process rather than later. And I defer to the manager as to when he sees that during the budget cycle.
So Dean, I'd like to ask you to elaborate a little bit about the impact on the budget. Like what kinds of things, what kinds of decisions might have a budgetary impact?
Sure. So, obviously, what's going to happen in this upcoming fiscal year has already been set by town meeting. But in the future, if we're looking at, an increased level of support for the West Acton Library, do we need to add staff? Do we need to shift staff from the Memorial Library to the West Acton Library, or do we have to increase the overall effort going in towards libraries? Alternatively, and I'm not recommending this, but if there's a decision made that, for whatever reason, we're not going to put as much support into the West Acton Library, what impact will that have not only on the staffing, but also on things like utility expenses for the library for next fiscal year? I know there's been discussion in the past, and there's been some requests. There was one that was turned down by CPC for some money for an accessibility study and some improvements to the building. So the submittal time for any kind of request of that sort is around the 15th of November. So all of these things, everything you do is going to have some sort of a budgetary impact, either positive or negative. And it's best if we can make our policy decisions and the manager can develop the budget around those decisions.
David?
So if I could just second that, so maybe these are even more than one agenda item, in addition to the thing that was attempted to be addressed by the town meeting article. I know too that to follow on to what Dean said, the CPC chose not to approve an accessibility study. And some of the things that were said there and I'm not saying anybody did anything wrong at all, right? But some of the assumptions of what were facts, I think, were not facts. But people said a certain role for the Historic District Commission and certain things that couldn't be done with that building and things. I'm not sure that those are the things that were said are absolutely correct. And I think we should, if it's something that we want to ask the CPC again for that kind of funding, we should have a conversation about that ahead of time.
Okay, I'm going to summarize that as, so us volunteers, or almost volunteers, will continue to work on this. So we've got Alyssa as the rep to both libraries, and you and I have had conversations about, what next steps should happen in what order. So we'll continue that, and we'll both stay alert to what's the right time to bring certain items back to the board, so we can have an open discussion about them. So we'll stay in touch about that, and then we'll involve the staff later for the heavy lifting. Thanks. That's that one. Let's see, next one, real property disposition, 13 School Street. That was item 14. As you may recall, there was an amendment to require that any proposal make available somehow 24 parking spaces. We then recommended, that passed, we then recommended against the motion, the overall motion as amended, and it became postponed indefinitely. So what, if anything, do we want to do about 13 School Street? And David, this was your article, so you might want to say something about what's next, and then we can hear from the manager.
Yeah, I think this was a difficult thing. The amendment passed by 4 votes at town meeting. I think, we heard from people involved with the church. They were concerned about parking. I think the members of the board were, committed to address the parking concerns of the church. What was new at town meeting was the parking concerns both by Exchange Hall and some of the tenants at Exchange Hall. Was a really unfortunate thing from my point of view. Those are commercial operations, right? It's, to me, very different than the church. They shouldn't expect free parking from the town. There were even some complaints that the parking was closed to them during the week. Those might be out-of-date regulations, but that parking lot was paid for and maintained by parking lot revenue by commuters. And so it's kind of almost unfair to take it away from commuters and give it to a commercial operation. So anyway, I think that's one level of discussion to have. And the other level of discussion is that it's going to be very, very difficult to find I'll say, exciting use for 3 School Street, right? It's to have housing be built on the property that the town doesn't own at 9 School Street, that can happen, right? That's, and it would be easy if we wanted to do it. I'm not saying that my position was always that if we wanted to give up that parking lot, we wanted to be able to get something significant in return. And significant to me is, it was changes involving the old Civil Defense building. And since we couldn't do that, there was kind of no point to the article. I mean, the one responder to the RFP was, there wouldn't have been possible to do what they suggested. So it's very difficult to have, to find something there to revitalize that area of South Acton.
Can you Do you have any next steps to recommend, either for the board or for staff?
I think there are some things that we can do, I mean, unless we expect something, you know, a proposal like we got last time, which I think is not likely. There are some nonprofits that we could talk about hosting there, but it doesn't, to me, that those nonprofits would be, that's a very good thing to be able to put there. But it doesn't have the revitalization that that we would get from, you know, it's not likely to cause, you know, a store or something to be built across the street at the old post office, which was a restaurant for a while and now is not, and or some of the other properties where there could be a shop or a store. But it's, to my mind, better than having the building be empty. And 3 School Street has already been approved by town meeting for us to dispose of if we found a good use for it.
So, Mr. Manager, I'm not actually coming to you at this point with a clear set of next steps, because we don't actually know what's next. But if you have any updates that would be helpful for us to know, it seems like we need to schedule agenda time to really talk about giving you better direction about next steps.
Thank you. So this parcel is sort of in a area that's being discussed as part of the MBTA zoning, South Acton Village planning. So the timing is okay. It would have been, I think, more advantageous for us to have the ability to dispose of the property when we had a proposal that worked. So I think having that not available to us, I think a next step would be to try again once there's more information about what the future zoning would be in that area, because that would give even more certainty to a potential developer. In terms of developments in the meantime, I do understand that after town meeting, the property next door may have been put on the market, but that's not, I don't think there's not much we can do about that. At the same time, the board, when we talked about this project last year, the board directed us to do the RFP for this project, and then once we do that, to start working on the other side of the train tracks to where the Gordon Richards building is, and start working on that. So that was our plan, was to do this, and then we were going to start working on 19 and 21 Maple Street building as the next project. So I guess it would be helpful to have direction from the board whether you still want us to proceed that way, or if you want us to hold off on the whole neighborhood.
So that sounds like a pretty clear agenda item for us for the future, is to discuss whether we, what the order of things we want you to do, whether we want you to proceed the Gordon Richardson property, or whether we want you to, do something with the School Street property, and also clarify how that relates to the South Acton Village planning process. So that's something that's a next step that we can take to have that discussion. And I'll be working with you on, when we schedule that. There might be other comments from other board members about this very topic. Dean.
So a couple of things. Yes, I did, the owner of the 9 School Street did reach out to me and did make note of the fact he does have it on the market, just it's a financing thing. See if he can get a partner that wants to help him. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. As far as the 3 School Street, if we don't have a good plan for it, if nothing else, we've got 2 antique fire trucks that need a home. Mm-hmm. So, the building is still structurally sound. It's still got a roof on it. I don't think that there's any particular need to push ahead with disposing of it. Mm-hmm. We always could do that, but I don't see there's a particular need. And I'll note the fact that the 2 fire trucks, the old antiques, were restored with CPC funding some years ago, and it's incumbent on us to make sure that they're properly preserved. As far as the use of the 13 School Street as a parking lot for the tenants at Exchange Hall, I'll second what David said. part of the original plan was that Exchange Hall was supposed to build their own parking lot behind the building, which they never did. They signed a contract with us to lease our parking space, and they never made a payment on it. Because why should they? Because they can park there for free on our property anyway. So I think, you know, it's one thing to support, you know, the general neighborhood and the church, but, you know, to basically provide a town subsidized parking lot for a private developer certainly rubs me the wrong way. So I think that would color any decision points I'd like to make when this does come up during the agenda. And finally, I think other members of the board have seen this as well. There's still several entities, nonprofits, that are very interested in the Maple Street property. And I think some of them are under the impression that it'll be something that's going to get moved ahead probably with the beginning of the new fiscal year. So if we're going to have a discussion about whether or not an RFP goes out for the 19 to 23 Maple Street property, I think we should have the discussion sooner rather than later. I know at least one of the nonprofits is under quite a bit of pressure from their present landlord. So I'd hate to see this thing just hang out there until sometime next winter. So I think we really should move ahead with it. That was kind of the declared plan right from the beginning, was we come to some clarity on School Street and then move right ahead with Maple Street. So I'd push that a little harder than not.
More comments? Alyssa?
Thank you. I'll try and be brief. Thank you for mentioning the fire trucks. I have been saying for 5 years now that I really wish we had a little firehouse museum, because when my kids were little, I took them into Boston, which is a long drive with littles, to go to the Firehouse Museum. Obviously, that's not a huge revenue generator. We might have to rely on volunteers, maybe the Acton Historical Society, and it would be open only once a week, or maybe it would be really exciting and be open every day, and we could somehow, you know, get the Discovery Museum excited and involved. But at the very least, we should store those antique trucks down there, because they're delightful. I also wanted to mention that there was no ability to build a parking lot behind Exchange Hall because Nylander Way, the condominium, homeowners association, whatever it's called, they didn't have an easement granted to the owner of Exchange Hall. So despite the thought that that was a possibility, it actually wasn't. Also, I did hear at some point during the discussion, either at the board meeting or at town meeting, that housing is not a possibility for 3 School Street. And I don't think that that's accurate, because Habitat came to the Acton Community Housing Corporation with a proposal to have that building sold for $1 or whatever arrangement they make to create commuter housing. And the reason that they didn't wasn't because it wasn't possible, it was because 26 Carlisle Road came up as another option. So now that that is about to be completed, perhaps Habitat might be ready for another project. So that's not, you know, I'd rather see a firehouse there, but also it is a possibility for housing. And I also think that maybe rather than, Dean, you said you were concerned about, you know, waiting too long on this. I think another possibility that we should keep in mind is even though 9 is now on the market, there's a for sale sign on the property, there's still the possibility that the town could somehow negotiate a 40B project with all 3 properties. The Redgate proposal had a lot of 3 bedrooms and a need for a lot of parking spaces, but if they were smaller units, either, you know, 1 bedroom or senior housing to require fewer cars, then you would still have parking spaces available, set aside a few, whether it's 6 or 9, I don't know, for the church. And one suggestion that I heard from someone on the HDC is that the fire station could be the common house for the housing that was built, so that we can get creative and come up with something for all 3 properties still. That's still a possibility that I don't think we should discount.
I'm going to try to avoid turning this into a discussion about the actual topic, but I think we've gotten a lot of grist for figuring out what we need to talk about. So we'll put it on an actual agenda with, so people who know that area and care about it can know about it ahead of time. And we'll come back and proceed. If that's okay, I'll move on to the next one. All sorts of things that passed without a problem that'll just happen, all the budget things. Okay, for the 2 home rule petitions, I'm all the way up to number 34 now. Change minimum voting age to 16 for town elections. Again, this was a Himija item. She's not here, but it seems like this is filing my understanding of the work is there's the filing of the actual home rule petition, which is a relatively mechanical, single action. And then there's we would be invited to, testify at a hearing about it, and then the legislature does its magic. So I'm thinking our next step is just to file the home rule petition and find someone who might want to testify. But Mr. Manager, are there other steps involved in this one?
I think that's a good next step.
Okay, so we will have a discussion at some other time soon about who might be prepared to testify, whether that's a select board member or a staff member. And if you are a select board member who would be particularly interested in testifying, let the manager know, so we'll be prepared. It didn't take that long, but there might be other comments about that one? No? No? Okay. Please, question. Oh, and there's a question. Well, first we'll hear from the board member, and then we'll hear from the audience. Go ahead.
Does the person who testifies need to be a current elected official or staff, or might we call on Himija to testify? Is that allowed?
A fine creative solution. I have no idea. I imagine it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Leo, first, I'm sorry, David, you go first.
I did work with Himija a bit on that, so I could be involved.
Okay. Leo.
Leo Fochman, Wright Terrace. As you're working through this, I was just curious if you can discuss one issue. Right now, when there are elections, we post what was voted for in different districts. Since we're going to have a separate registration for 16 and 17-year-olds, can we actually have a breakdown too by voters 18 and older and 16 and 17, just to get a feel for what's going on? Mm-hmm. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks for the suggestion. The next one was ranked choice voting. Similarly, that would need just to file the home rule petition and then to have someone testify. Mr. Manager, am I getting that about right? Is that the same level of effort as the previous one?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so we need to find someone potentially to testify, and there's a whole bunch of ranked choice voting advocates in Acton who, might be willing to testify. The nice thing about these hearings is usually they are, you can, once this hearing is scheduled, anyone can sign up to testify. So we could have multiple testimonies. The next one was Economic Development Committee, non-binding resolution that Fran was the contact person for, and this is about creating an economic development plan. What's the next step, Fran?
So I think the next step would be possibly consulting with the town. I know we have a great economic development director, Julie, and maybe working with her to figure out what would be the next steps of integrating EDC goals for the town, having them align with the town's goals. What would those look like?
Well, let's turn to the manager, who might have thought about this.
Thank you. So I think the work here would be to do a lot of, it's a study, it's a consultant, it's something that we would probably seek a grant for. And I think that it would probably be a competitive grant application, because I think the state wants to invest in things like this. They actually broke out the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development and made a standalone economic development secretariat. So I think I believe that we could get funding, and then it would just be a matter of if we do. The Economic Development Committee would have a big part of it, obviously the Select Board, and then I guess who else is the question, which we would work on.
Okay, so it sounds like a moderate level of effort. It's not nothing. So there's some grant writing and all that. So this is, do you have any thoughts about whether that kind of level of work rises to the level that would be appropriate to have as a goal? Or does it just seem like routine part of what planning and economic development does, or what?
It's not, I mean, it is something that I think having a goal behind it would give it momentum. It also would help with grant applications, to say that it's a goal of the town. And it helps that it's a town meeting, but that's non-binding. And I think having the board support it formally would help as well. In terms of the level of work, I don't think it's going to be the same level of work as the climate action plan, but I think it's going to be close.
I think that's what
Fran?
we're comparing it to.
Okay, so smaller than a climate action plan, but bigger than a bread box. Okay, yeah. Somewhere in there.
Can it coincide with the master plan of 2025 or?
Well, I mean, one way to look at it would be a prequel, or something that feeds into it. So if we have a climate plan and we have a housing plan, if we had an economic development plan, that's really good foundations for the master planning process, in addition to everything else that we're doing.
David's got a thought.
I actually have a general question for all these non-binding resolutions. I think maybe it's my assumption on level of effort. I mean, obviously, some of these are completely different levels of effort, but all of them are some level of effort. And might take a goal, right? And so is the question we're asking now as to whether these feed into the goal process or not, or what are we discussing right now in terms of non-binding resolutions? What is the outcome of this discussion? Is it just that we move forward and put them into our goal-setting process, or something else?
I think it's to gather information so that the board is informed together about the relative level of effort and what the next steps might be. So, and that will inform our goal-setting process. Yeah. A follow-up.
So, but then the next steps we would not do if we didn't make it a goal, unless it was a trivial operation, right? That's my assumption, right?
Yes.
Again, because we can't do everything. And so we'd have to decide which of these we want to make goals, and then we would execute the next steps, and maybe some of them we make goals next year or something. Whatever.
Yeah,
I just
think
wanted to understand this, make sure we were all on the same page, or if not, reconcile our pages.
Yeah, no, I think you've got it. Some of these may become goals. Some may not become goals because there's so much effort, or because we think they're not important to do now and we put them in a long-term goal. Or they might be so simple that we just look at the manager and he says, yeah, we'll do that. It's all part of our normal job. So we're just trying to get a sense of that to inform the goal process. Yeah. Fran?
I don't know if this is an appropriate question. Do you have individual, this is a question for John, individual folks at Town Hall who apply for grants? Is that a person's job? Sorry.
It's a team approach, and usually we have a project leader who's most familiar with the subject matter. So it could be anyone from, Corey or Public Works Director, it could be Economic Development Director, the Sustainability Director, and they all work with me, and we get them out, we get them in. But it's a lot of work. And no, to answer your question more directly, no, we do not have a grant writer. So Austin, the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs, one of his key roles was having relationships with state and federal agencies, and particularly ones that are writing grants for us or giving grants for us. And since he has moved on, that role is vacant. So others are, like Julie Pierce and others are stepping up. But it's stepping up, and there's only so much stepping up people can do.
I think we're done with that EDC one. Is that, okay, good. Let's go on to sewer commission analysis. Hey, look, Alyssa's here, who actually presented this. So you might have some thoughts about what the next steps are, Alyssa.
Thank you. I hope that it will become a short-term goal for the board and that we can decide what form, what process we want to pursue, whether it's creating a working group or outsourcing and hiring a consultant. And obviously that will involve figuring out if there's funding available in Turnback or other to do that.
Okay, yeah, that does sound like exactly the next step. Thank you. The next one was the non-binding resolution anti-bias training. I think, did Himija present this one? Or was she the select board member assigned? She was. Okay. So let's see, it seems like the next step would also be similarly that we have to consider if it's a goal. But there might be other thoughts about next steps. David?
So I just want to say that this was very similar to one of the recommendations from the DEIC, which I think is currently being worked on. I don't know whether it's her first priority or not, but worked on by the DEI director, and so I don't know what where that stands currently.
John, do you have any awareness or thoughts for us about how this
Yes.
relates to work that's
So
ongoing?
in hiring the Wanjiko, our new diversity officer, director, we used the recommendations from the DEIC, one of which was related to this, and also the dozens of recommendations in the report done by the Collins Center about what a person in this role would do for the community. And so she's working her way through those 42 or whatever recommendations. And some of the work product you've already seen. Training is certainly a big part of it. And she's been working on identifying good training. I think there's a lot of training out there, but we want to get good training and ones that's been successful other places. So we're working through that, and I expect more to come on that. I think that'll happen whether it's a goal of the board or not, to be honest with you. I think it's something that's been in process for a while, but certainly having it as a goal gives it more momentum, as I've mentioned in the past.
Any other comments on that one? No? Okay. Next one is non-binding resolution code of conduct, which Himija also presented. Are there people here that have information about the state of our code of conduct?
So I have the materials that were in process for that. If it was the board's wish, I could pick that up and then bring it back to the board in some form for discussion. I haven't really done anything with the materials that were in progress. I read them over at one time, but anyway, if it's the board's wish, I'm happy to, put them into a form where they could be brought back to us for discussion.
Dean?
Yeah, this was sort of in process when I was chair, and I had some conversations with the town council about it. And then just about the time that we were getting ready for town meeting, we had the decision come down about the Southborough case, which really complicates a lot of the issues related to the code of conduct. So I think, if we want to proceed in this manner, it's certainly going to involve some significant effort on the part of town council. And, I'm really concerned about how this code of conduct could be implemented at some point to be used for the suppression of free speech. And I think the Supreme Judicial Court decision about Southborough specifically dealt with that. So I'm very skeptical about this. I think, there are state laws involving the Ethics Commission and, conflict of interest that we're all bound by. There are lots of other rules on the state level that we have to abide by. And I'm not sure that we're going to be able to come up with something that does anything that's not going to be in conflict with either the U.S. Constitution or the state constitution. And I know that the initial passes that I saw for the proposed code of conduct was quite lengthy, and certainly large sections of it I think would have been struck down as a result of the SJC decision. So it could be a really big project, and I'm not sure that it's really going to have any particular benefit. And a lot of people are very concerned about the fact that these are backdoor ways to suppress free speech. And I think we've got to be very cognizant of that. So I'm less than enthused.
Just a sec. It's because some relevant information. So we got an invitation to the MMA today for a workshop today. That's the Mass Municipal Association, and this was a joint workshop that was about the Southborough decision. This was the decision that where a person at resident comments was comparing the chair to Hitler, and the chair took offense to that and told them to be quiet. That went to court. The SJC said, no, actually, let's look at the Constitution, free speech, the guarantee of free speech in this kind of situation means really you can limit, when people can talk and how long they can talk, but you can't say much about what they're saying up there at the podium, except for a few, very specific exceptions like, fighting words or incitement or, threats of violence and things like that. But the good news was that there were reps from both the MMA and the MIAA, which is the, municipal, and it's the insurance consortium that works with all the towns and cities. They were actually in the middle of building a new model code of conduct that took into account the Southborough decision. It might be that if we wait for that to be done, which is scheduled to be done in a few weeks, that we'll have a good model to start from that doesn't have the problems of previous versions. So it may be doable. So we may want to revisit that after that. And I saw Alyssa's hand up and I see David's hand up. But why don't you go first, Alyssa, because we haven't heard from you yet.
Thank you. I'm not sure I have anything different to say than what you just said, other than I think that this is doable and not a huge project. I see this as something that could be rolled into an update of our board and committee volunteer handbook, because there is a little bit of text in there. And the SJC ruling was about limiting the public's comment, not government officials who are essentially public employees, which is why we have to abide by the conflict of interest and the OML. So I think it's a very doable, not so problematic, and a small project.
David?
Yeah, I'll add on to what Alyssa just said. I think the intent of the petitioner here was to make sure that residents get treated fairly by boards and committees, not, as in the Barron decision, what residents can say to boards and committees, right? So it's pretty clear from what you said, Jim, that residents can say anything they want to boards and committees except, for certain very specific things. But I think the vast majority of boards and committees are advisory committees to us, and we can set whatever standards we want for them. And I think we should do whatever we think is appropriate, right? I don't think we need to feel inhibited there.
Hey, speaking of public comment, but wait. First, before we hear public comment, we have Dean. I just want to hear from select board members first, but I'm glad you're standing there.
Yeah, I think certainly the Southborough decision spoke specifically about the audience saying things to the board. But I think we also have to accept the fact that we are all citizens here, even though we might be effectually town employees. And all of our board and committee members are all citizens, and they all should be able to speak. I think they should be able to speak as individuals. I think any code of conduct, we should make it clear that an individual member should not represent themselves as reflecting the opinion of the board or committee that they work for. But I object strenuously to the idea that just because you serve on a board, you are somehow have given up your constitutional rights of free speech. And I think therein lies the real rub on this whole thing. I think it's important that people be able to express themselves as individuals, and that there be free exchange of speech and ideas. It's just eventually, if it's a piece of public business been brought to a town board or committee eventually votes on it, and that's the decision of the board or committee. But I think the fact that somebody might say something in a board and committee meeting that somebody objects to should not be a reason why somebody should be disciplined or blackballed from a committee or something like that. So I think it's important to respect the fact that we all still have rights. And just because we might have been elected or appointed, we don't give up those rights.
Thanks. Well, this is a lively discussion. Let's get a little more input on this from the author of the petition.
Yes, that petition was mine, and I just want to clarify to you, Dean, just because you're on a board or committee, it doesn't limit you to freedom of speech when you're standing at a resident concern. The point of having a code of conduct is so that past behaviors are not repeated. For example, when Black people were referred as to a shopping list, that was made at a board meeting, and it's unacceptable. We have to hold ourselves to a higher standard when we are on a board or committee. What you choose to do after that is your problem. You have that right. No one's limiting you from freedom of speech when you're standing as a resident concern. You proved that tonight. But when you're behind that desk and you're representing our town, your speech does matter, because you're not supposed to be offended. You're not supposed to make comments that are indignifying to people in the BIPOC community. It's unacceptable. We have to represent our town just the way we expect a person who's getting paid or not getting paid representing the town by being on a board of committee. That's not limiting your freedom of speech. That's not making you give up a right. Everywhere we go, you have a regular job. there's a code of conduct. You are an employee at a hospital, you have a code of conduct. The whole point of my warrant article was so that past behaviors are not repeated, and we hold people accountable for being offensive when you're representing the town, when you are a board or committee member or a staff member. That was the purpose of this, and that's why it passed, because a lot of people understood that it is needed. So with that, that's all I say. I'm not going to talk about this anymore because that's why it passed, and that's why it's up to you guys. And I know that Hamidja, before she left, wrote a modification to the code of conduct that existed, but like I said, that's not my job anymore. I presented the warrant article because it was needed, because I am so sick and tired of people like me being subjected to being insulted just because someone who's white privileged doesn't understand what it's like to be brown skin or black. It is unacceptable. It's 2023, and we have to hold ourselves to the highest standard when we're sitting behind a desk at a board of committee. What you choose to do after that, that's on you.
Thank you, Madeline. So next steps seem to include having this come back to the board for an open discussion, because there's some really cool hot topics in here that we want to continue to talk about. Your thoughts, though? I see both Alyssa and David.
Who are you calling?
Oh, Alyssa, let's start there.
I just wanted to suggest to David, who offered to bring the materials to the board, to look at the recently updated Littleton Select Board Code of Conduct. It might not be called a Code of Conduct, but they just recently made a change, and it's short and sweet. And that might serve as a template as well.
David.
So I just wanted to say it's very difficult here to have this be debated in the abstract, right? So I think it's actually not productive to bring it back for a discussion without having a draft something. I mean, maybe a pre-draft or a list of points or something, because then we can debate, we can say, you know, we like this point, we think that point is going in the wrong direction, or this point steps on people's rights, whatever. So anyway, I would suggest that before we discuss this again, we have a draft, and I'm happy to do that, or someone else can do it, whatever works out.
Okay, so that we can continue to talk about it, and I agree that it does make sense to, have something concrete to work with, so we're not talking abstractions. Were there comments from the audience? I thought I saw something flash by that there might have been a comment online.
No, there's no hands up.
Okay, no hands up, okay. Then let's move on. This will come back. Next one, reduce transfer station sticker prices. I think this was assigned to you, Fran. Do you have thoughts about next steps?
John, I have lots of thoughts about next steps. What would this look like? And how would we approach this?
So I would defer to the team who does this work. Corey York, our Director of Public Works, oversees that operation. But I do know that there is a rate structured right now for seniors, which I believe are classified as 60 years and older. If the suggestion from this article is to create a different rate structure with a reduction for another group of people, we could do that. We just need to figure out what that group of people is.
That's my question.
And then,
Yep.
so, that is going to take work.
Yeah.
That's not something that we can just do on our own. It would need some, input from the board, input from the community. So that is a bigger project than just putting together a spreadsheet.
Okay, great. So yeah, it's a moderate level of effort, and it will require some work both by us and by staff. Any other comments about that particular one? Oh, what time of year do we set rates? Just in terms of understanding the timing of this. Do we set the?
I think they stay until we think there's a need to change them,
Okay,
I believe is how it works.
okay. So we can do this forever makes sense with the timing of the board and the staff, and it also would be impacted by how it sets up in the goals. Dean?
Yeah, just a point of information that the new dump stickers come out usually in September. So usually we aim to get the rates figured by then, but there's no reason, if this is something we're going to work on for a while, you know, it might be a year before we come up with the new rate structure. You know, we might retain our existing rate structure. The other issue that we had a presentation at our last meeting, that was discussion about, you know, should we look at curbside pickup? And how long is that information gathering going to take? Because there was some promise about some outreach. And that outreach, I think, is going to be hard to do in July and August. So maybe this is something that should get rolled into that whole discussion with the public outreach that Corey and Andrea Becerra were talking about doing.
Thanks. My only comment is that unlike the senior center, where seniors start at 60, at the transfer station, it's 65, just to get the record straight. Because this was the first year I got to only pay $10 for my dump sticker, and it was very exciting. So it's very clear in my mind.
That is exciting.
Yeah. Composting. Oops. Next, 41, composting facilities at apartment buildings. Fran, you got thoughts about next steps?
I have a lot of thoughts about next steps. I'm not really sure where to go with this. I'm sorry, Madeline. I've been thinking a lot about this. I don't know, not to be a negative Nelly, but I just find it difficult to offer something like this for individual apartment buildings that are, you know, owned by, you know, management companies that we may not know or know, you know, to have a town-wide composting. I don't know what that would look like. I need to find out more information. I'd love to somehow, I don't know, link maybe having stickers to the transfer station and encouraging apartment dwellers to compost in that regard. So I'm still thinking.
Okay.
Okay.
And are you okay with continuing to thinking about this, reaching out and getting help as necessary?
Has some thoughts.
Okay, great. Alyssa?
So my thoughts are to first explore the cost to apartment building owners of pickup, because I think that it's pretty problematic to set up composting facilities on site. I personally don't put any animal products like, you know, cheese rinds or chicken bones or eggshells in my compost because I don't want the animals coming. So that's why I use the transfer station. And I know that Black Earth Compost does pick up. So that could just be something that apartment building owners add. They, you know, they have to have trash pickup, and some of them probably do recycling pickup, so compost pickup. So figure out how much that costs, maybe figure out if there's some way the town can incentivize that program, if there, you know, if we get a high volume of apartment building owners signing on, maybe there's a bulk discount or something like that. But that would be my suggestion, because I do think that it's possible for apartment dwellers, well, it's very easy and affordable for apartment dwellers to get the stickers to take, but not all of them have the ability to do that because they don't all drive and they don't all own vehicles. So the pickup at the property is probably the best plan.
Okay, I think we have a sense of some of the possibilities and some of the level of effort, and we'll wait to see where this ends up on our you know, shorter, long-term goals to understand, you know, what sort of effort this might require. And we have a potential comment from a resident.
So that was my article too.
Yeah.
And I just want to give a quick insight as to why I decided to put this on as a warrant article. When I was doing my research on composting, I found that there's other states that actually have multifamily unit composting. So I don't know, within your research, if you would like to, I know Texas is one of them. I know composting was started by a tenant of a housing authority in New York, for New York City. And there's some good insight on that, that might be able to help you structure what composting would be for multifamily units here in Acton. And I think it's actually a really good idea for, you know, the saving of our planet. I don't know what to word. It's freaking cold in here and I'm freezing and I'm losing my thought of words, like my fingers are turning purple. Can somebody raise that heat a little bit, please?
Thanks, Madeline. Yes, yeah, well, I'm sure we'd love to see that information. You could either send it to the select board or send it to Fran, and that'll help us understand more about future possibilities. Other comments about that one? No? Okay. Slow increase of new single-family homes did not pass. Neither did reduced size of new single-family homes. So I'm not expecting we need to have conversations about those, but I'm happy to take comments if there's thoughts about those. Okay. The one that did pass was stop odd-shaped lots, which is actually a strategy that potentially addresses both of those issues, but it's a specific thing. So it could actually be scoped out a little bit more. Stopping odd-shaped lots would be a change to our bylaws, so it would require, planning staff to look at, how this is done in other towns and, propose some ways, have some public hearings. John, do you have any comment about the level of effort that sort of research takes in developing new potential changes to bylaws?
Yeah, so I think an example would be the work. Well, it takes some community engagement and some work of planning staff. And I think it would be something that we probably wouldn't do if it weren't a goal. Mm-hmm. Because we have several things that are goals that we're trying to do.
Perfect, thank you. Any comments about next steps? Dean?
Yeah, it's my intent to propose that as a goal. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it'll get any traction or not, but I think it's a real serious issue, and I think it deserves some attention. There's been some really high-profile situations recently with that, and I believe there are some neighboring towns that actually have ratios set up between the depth and width of lots and stuff. So certainly it's going to take some engagement. Certainly it's going to be a zoning bylaw change, but I personally will be pushing for this as a goal when we meet next week. Okay.
And just so, we should also keep in mind that anything that is going to end up going to town meeting that requires a zoning change, 2/3, might also require us to, some of us at least, to step up and be part of a process of, getting the vote out and doing the education. So some of that effort is sort of on our side rather than on the staff side, just so we know. Great. Any other comments on that one? Thanks. Renters' access to confidential health department inspections. Fran, this was yours. This was approved as amended because you made some amendments to it. What are next steps?
So this, passed, approved as amended. There are aspects of this I really like. I know there's some opposition from landlords. I love the education portion of this, with the health department creating a brochure to hand out to renters when they sign a lease. I love that aspect. And I also think unless a landlord, in this case, and as this was written, landlords would be notified if there was a problem resulting from an inspection. And I think that that's fine. I don't see a problem with that. I know there is some opposition from some landlords, and I don't really see it as an impediment. So.
Just before we hear David, I'm just wondering if we could ask the town manager about if you have any insight into, sort of level of effort. Is this tiny change in, health department procedures, or is this, a change that requires more, or do we know about that yet, John? Mike, sorry.
I think if this were a goal of the board for us to work with the Board of Health to implement, then I think it would require a few things. Changing some of the procedures in the health department, publishing a brochure. I mean, it doesn't have to be published in paper, I suppose, but it still would have to be published, and then we'd have to find a way to get it to everyone that rents their property, and it says we require them to issue it to renters, so we have to figure out how to enforce that requirement. So it would take some work. So if it's a goal, we'll do what we can to make it happen.
Thanks. Okay, now, David.
Yeah, to me, this needs, I'd like to see some more research, outreach, and a proposal, a very specific proposal. This got changed, and then no criticism again, got changed at the last minute at town meeting. I think it needs some thought. There were people talking about different procedures for different size landlords, and, I don't know what the right solution is. I'm not making any claim there, but I think I would like, before, this is just my opinion, I would like to see the proposal before we ask the health department to change its procedures. So anyway, that's, I think this needs some work, and so I think it needs to be a real goal if we want to move forward with it.
Thanks. Alyssa.
Thank you. I just had one thought with regards to the objections from some housing providers. And since this proposal involves a publication, paperless probably, of renters' rights, then it would be very easy to add in some steps to take so that it's very clear that your first step is to contact your landlord. So information on, and this is the information that I got when I was a tenant, you want to document every single outreach. So save the email, make a note of the day that you made the phone call so that we can document efforts of the tenants to reach out to landlords, because I think that the point that you want a good relationship between the tenants and landlords, and it's a two-way relationship, and that needs to happen first rather than going straight to the Board of Health. I think that might alleviate that particular concern.
Yep, it's your
So
petition.
that
This is
was
why we're
my
here.
petition, and I beg to differ from what Alyssa says, because, once again, renters are not protected, and some landlords love to intimidate renters. And if you're in the BIPOC community, it gets 10 times worse. So to require verification that we document things, that shouldn't be the job of the Board of Health. The Board of Health should be non-biased, and if a renter calls them with a concern, they should go in, inspect the apartment or house or whatever, and if they find a violation, then they contact the landlord. Up to what point do we keep ignoring that renters are being affected every single day by some landlords that are, I'm sorry, but they're pretty shitty. And it affects our health, and that's not okay. I shouldn't have to subject myself to the Board of Health or the Health Department by giving them documentation for them to do their job. They have a job. Their job is to go and inspect, find the problem, give the violation, go back and re-inspect. Up to what point do we keep ignoring the fact that renters need to be protected, just like homeowners as well? I mean, there's a fine line there, and someone needs to hear us out. It's not fair to us. We're human beings too. We deserve the same rights any homeowner has to when it comes to living in a safe space. Some of us don't have that. I could point out the thousands of things that, are scary to us, and how there's people, when the article passed For example, at town meeting, I had 2 landlords approach me. Did you really have mold? Why would you think I would lie about that? Yes, I have the pictures, I have all the documentation. You want to see it? Call me, welcome me. No, instead, it's, we don't believe you and you're meaningless because that's what you are, a landlord, a tenant. Well, if it wasn't for us tenants, you wouldn't have the things that you have because we still have to pay our rent. Therefore, yes, we should be included and protected. And that's why I did this, and I'm happy that it passed. And I hope that you really, when you make your decision, you pay attention to the amended word. I didn't have a problem with it because it showed that the Board of Health and the Health Department wanted to work with me in ensuring that renters are protected. And I hope that you don't go change that because that's detrimental to us, the renters, tenants, and we need that protection. So please, just remember about us and don't gaslight the problem because it's hurtful. And some of us, I don't want to see someone again like my little boy was suffering, that's still traumatizing. And I'm not the only one. I just was the only one that was brave enough to speak up because people are that afraid. And I'm gonna continue being their voice. And I'm gonna continue coming here and harping on it because it's that important and it's that needed. And I don't ever wanna see a little kid like my boy again. It's not fair.
Looks like we got more comment.
Leo Fochman, Wright Terrace. I think we all need to be a little bit more careful. We have the Board of Health, and then we have the Health Department. It was said that both agreed with it, but I heard from the chair of the Board of Health, and they did not recommend that article, the citizens petition. So again, we have one that sets policy and one that enacts policy. Thank you.
So next steps might include Fran or someone, if they're willing, to understand the different parts of this. There's the literature part, there's the change in procedures part. So there's different parts of this that might require different kinds of effort. And I'm wondering if, Fran, you'd be willing to continue that forward? Okay. So we have at least a small next step, which is Fran's going to continue to work on this and get back to us. David.
Does that mean for our goal-setting session that we'll know what would be a goal, right? So my feeling here is that if we are concerned about this, that kind of work needs to be done after we make it a goal. Because to me, there's a lot of work and there are a lot of things to consider here. And so I think that, anyway, how do we know this? From what I don't know how to reconcile what you just said about Fran continuing to work on it and me knowing what the scope of a goal might be next week.
Yeah.
So,
Let me see if I can try to reconcile that. So there is some urgency, Fran, that if you're going to try to, if anyone wants to suggest a particular short or long-term goal related to this, it needs to be, it doesn't have to be the same as, implement this entire article. There might be parts that that are short-term that we want to operate on right away.
So, John, I might bug you so I could bug Cheryl just to chat,
Of course, that's what we're here for. It's not bugging.
Madeline, hi.
I just want to make a statement that's on record. As to what Leo was saying, the comment that the chair made was that, the Board of Health, the Health Department was never notified. Here's the issue. I don't know the difference till this day of what the Board of Health and the Health Department do because it was never taught to us. Another reason why this is so important to follow up on. It's frustrating when you're trying to do something good because you've been in those shoes and then having someone degrade your work and efforts to ensuring that all renters are protected when no education has ever been given to renters. even more of a reason, again, why this is so important. So the chair made a comment at a Human Services Committee meeting, and I spoke as a person who is a renter in this town, even though I was sitting behind my seat, because the reality is, this was not an article intended for anybody to get butthurt or pissed off that a woman of color stood up to do something that was right for all renters, regardless of their race, ethnic background, sexual orientation. These are facts that have been proven over and over again as to why this is needed. And it should not affect someone sitting on a chair or board, because that's why they're there for, right? That's why everybody's here for. When you're in a board or committee or staff member, like John said, you're there to do a job, and that's protecting all residents. And it's unfortunate that the comment was made, and I stood up for myself and for what I believe. And I just want people to remind you that it is their job to educate us on where to go and who to go to, even more of a reason why this needs to be implemented and done so that these issues don't arise again. And it could avoid some unwanted, legal actions, because that can happen, and we wouldn't want that.
Thank you. So I know that, so the next time Fran or I talk with you and meet with you, because I know that's coming up, we'll make sure to explain the difference between the Board of Health and the Health Department, so that can be clear for you.
If I can just add one little thing, is that working with Madeline on this article, it didn't even occur to me as the select board liaison or assignee to even say to her, oh, run this by the Board of Health. So I take responsibility for that too. That's something it didn't occur to me to do, so.
Thank you. Next one, unless there's more comments on this one? Yes, good.
So I just want to follow up on what Fran just said. I did take my petition to the Board of Health, but I was on a mission to do as much outreach as possible so that I could make a very powerful slide at the end that said all of these different boards and committees support this citizen petition. But I also want to point out that it's not necessary, because that's the power of the citizens petition, is that any individual can bring something to town meeting to discuss. And perhaps no town staff supports it. Perhaps no board or committee supports it. It's a very low bar. You got to get 10 signatures to bring a citizens petition. But that is the power of the democracy of town meetings. So I don't want anybody to feel that they need to that they're required to follow any specific procedure and get approval from any specific people. You just got to get 10 signatures on that petition.
Thank you. On to the next one. Okay, I get to turn the page. No. First there's Kelly's Corner Improvement Initiative Update. David, I think you were the person assigned to this.
Yes. I think the next steps here is, if this is a goal that, we need a, proposal from the planning department. I think the College Quarter Steering Committee is also working on their input into this. I think it's quite important for all zoning, for two things I'd like to say about this. One is, people immediately jump to the Kmart property, but that, I think, was not the point of the petitioner, and she said so. And in fact, if that building is not redeveloped, if the building is just used in place, any changes to zoning don't apply. If the building's raised and something new is put there, then the then current zoning applies. And the then current is very important, right? Zoning has to be done before the fact, right? whether it's, a particular type of business or whatever, some people come to us and say, why can't you stop this? Well, it's allowed by right there. Or if they come to us and say that's ugly or impractical or the wrong style for that part of town, again, that's what the zoning is. So I think this is definitely a worthwhile goal, because I think we have a short opportunity after the Kelly's Corner redevelopment gets done before some businesses might turn over there. And if we want something else, we need to say, town meeting needs to say. So I think if, the five of us are so inclined to make this as a goal, then, it's work by the planning department and everybody else, public outreach.
Yeah, as liaison to the Kelly's Corner Steering Committee, we did discuss this. And I think the committee is not particularly focused on it. I think the consensus was, yeah, this is something worthwhile taking on, but I think their time frame is probably looking in the years rather than months. And our understanding from talking with the planning director is that, this is going to be a really significant effort and some really significant dollars behind it. So I think, we should keep that in mind. It would probably help for our goal setting if we had some idea of, how much is considered a significant effort and significant number of consulting dollars before we decide to make it a goal. And then, that might inform us as to whether it's a short-term or long-term goal. If there's no money in the kitty right now to do this, then it's probably not going to be something that's likely to be done unless John can work his magic with grants. It's probably not something that's going to get done in time for town meeting next year. So I think if the town manager has any thoughts along the lines as to how much this is going to cost, I think that would help us in our deliberations next week.
John, you got any comments about level of effort involved in reviving the Kelly's Corner planning initiatives?
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember what the cost is of the South Acton Village planning that we're doing right now. It's more than 35,000, I know that. I can't remember if it's closer to 75 or what, but it's up there, and I think we got a grant for that entirely. And so, there are there's other items on this docket of cost items related to zoning study or economic development study that this could tie into. Well, no, it's pretty isolated, but I guess to answer your question, it's going to be more than 50,000, but I don't know.
Yeah. Thanks. Other questions or comments? David, go for it.
If we made this a goal and we were able to get a grant, then it could move forward. If we couldn't get a grant, then some monies could either be put in the budget for next year or actually brought forward to town meeting next year. And, considering that this motion passed town meeting, town meeting might be, I think that gives us some, whether it's assurance or some impetus on the part of town meeting members anyway, that they're interested in this topic and are interested in spending potentially something. And if we get a grant, all the better.
Alyssa.
So I may not have fully and completely understood the intent of the citizens petition, but it seemed to me that it was bringing back to the table, or reviving the work that was done before. So I'm a little confused right now is it because so much time has passed that we need to go through again, start all over with the public engagement? I'm not clear on why this is a more than $50,000 item and needing a consultant when it seems to me that a lot of this work has been done, and I thought the intent of the petition was to revisit it. And we've had a lot of zoning bylaws created by town staff. Some passed and some didn't pass at the last few town meetings. But could somebody explain to me why the need, are we starting all over again with a consultant?
Looks like there's a number of people that
There
could
are
address that.
4 of you that want to answer this question. I want to hear from all of you.
Well, starting from the left, Dean?
So, I think the discussions that we had in the Kelly's Corner Steering Committee, Kelly's Corner Steering Committee had been dormant for about a year. And I think that the way it's constituted right now, we're talking about, maybe meet every once a month, every 2 months, something like that. And so not a lot of work can get done that way. I think some of the discussion points we had was the old proposed zoning failed. Not by a lot, but, I've been beaten down numerous times on the losing end of a 2/3 vote with zoning articles. So, it's frustrating, but that's the reality. I think there are folks residential neighbors in some of the close neighborhoods that were vehemently and vocally opposed to what was proposed in the past, which is one of the reasons why it failed. A lot of those folks are still there, and they're waiting. Some of the other thoughts that have occurred, it's been a passage quite a number of years. What's changed since then? The infrastructure that's being put in place now was not even seriously being considered when this was defeated the last time. What's the impact of things like commuting traffic? We've had the pandemic, and what's the difference in a lot of the not only the commuting patterns, but even things like the impact of retail. How has that changed in the last 5, 6, 8 years? Some of the things we heard from the potential development down on School Street is that, small shop retail basically is a tremendous money loser, and, how does that impact on it? So I think to really do this right, you're going to have to look at all the infrastructure problems. You've got to look at the population growth, demographic shift, buying patterns, the economics. So I think, we don't want to put something in place that's going to last forever or last for 20 or 30 years based on some presumptions that were made 10 years ago. So I think it's almost, certainly you can use that as a base, but if it didn't fly 10 years ago, maybe it's not the best base to build your new structure on.
All right, that was exceedingly clear. I understand now, so the other 3 of you don't have to, but you're welcome to answer. Thank you, Dean.
Are there more things people want to say about next steps for this goal or this petition? Or we'll just wait for our goal discussion?
I just want to take the opportunity to think more about the cost. I don't know what it would be, so I withdraw my estimate.
Make one little comment too, in that the EDC had a nice little working lunch on Friday, their meeting, and they talked about this as well. And it's kind of an exciting prospect to develop that area, so, yeah.
Which also suggests there might eventually be an overlap between the economic development plan and future Kelly's Corner zoning, although they probably happen in the other order, right? Plan first, the overall economic development plan, then informs the zoning changes you might want to see it. Okay, all good, thank you. We've gotten through all the warrant items. There might be final comments about, this process in general, or we'll move on to the next part of the meeting.
I just want to say that I'm very happy that we had this discussion ahead of next Monday's meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, there's usually so much that gets implied and crammed into the goal-setting session. I'm really glad we had a chance to stretch this out, too. Thanks. Hey, we're up to consent items, and then we've got a meeting evaluation, and then we're done. We had this back and forth with town council about whether we can just say, can we just, can we show all these items on a screen and invite us to waive the reading of them? But I don't think we really got to a good place on that, John. Do you feel like we can do that yet? Or should we still assume that we have to read all these?
It's the chair's discretion, but I would recommend tabling that until a future meeting.
Okay. Too radical a change to do it 9:30 and 9:40. Okay. So I'm going to read the consent items, say hold if you want to make sure we discuss them further. Approved meeting minutes, May 8th and 22nd, 2023. Number 8, approve additional funding from Acton Community Housing Corporation for $10,000 to Habitat for Humanity to support water service connection at 26 Carlisle Road. 9, approve and designate town manager to sign local initiative program for Parker Street Apartments.
Hold.
10, appoint Lori Cooney from associate to full at-large member of the Community Preservation Committee with a term to end June 30th, 2026. 11, approve a one-day alcoholic beverage license. And here's the list of all the various people applying for these. Elio Espinal, Nara Park Pavilion, June 17, 2023. Infant Toddler Children's Center, Nara Bathhouse Pavilion, June 14th, 2023. Integrated Project Management Company Incorporated, Nara Park, June 9th, 2023. Dolly Sapple, Nara Park, June 17, 2023. Linda Vecchiarello, Nara Park Pavilion, July 2nd, 2023. Boston Events, Nara Park Pavilion, June 16, 2023. Boston Events, Nara Park, multiple dates for summer concert series previously approved on April 24th, 2023, with updated dates. 12, accept donation from Acton Lions Club for $750 to support the 2023 Summer Concert Series and special events. 13, accept donations from Acton Women's Club for $600 towards the Serve gift account. 14, accept donation from Nancy Best for $500 to be used at the discretion of the Veteran Service Officer. 15, accept donation from Acton Self-Storage for $500 to support the 2023 Summer Concert Series and special events. So what I heard was that number 9 was held, and would someone like to make a motion about the others? David?
Move to approve consent items 7, 8, and 10 through 15 inclusive.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye or yes.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no or nay. None of those. That was unanimous. Well done. Alyssa, talk to us about number 9.
Thank you. I just wanted to be clear that I support this consent item. I just wanted to take the opportunity to clarify for the record that what we are voting on here is to add deed-restricted units to the subsidized housing inventory, and take the opportunity to state that I am not in support of the previous board's waiving of $1 million in sewer privilege fee. I do want to also take the opportunity to suggest that in the future, we might look at the 2010 sewer policy, which sets up the ability for the board to waive these fees. In fact, 8 was an approval for the community housing fund to pay for the water connection, and that fund is set aside specifically for affordable housing projects. So it's the entire town that is supporting that, rather than, just a small section of the town. So in the future, I'd like to reconsider the practice policy of waiving sewer privilege fees so that that burden, supporting affordable housing falls to the entire town rather than only the sewer ratepayers.
Got it, understood. Oh, there might be other comments. David?
I just wanted to say, just so it doesn't get dropped, that if we want to consider doing that, it needs to be put on an agenda, right? Because it needs to be done before the next request, right? We can't do it after someone's requested.
So Alyssa, I think that would put that on you to send a note to John and I to say, let's put this on an agenda, and we'll figure out how to get it on.
Okay, thank you.
With that, would someone like make a motion to approve item 9?
I would like to move to approve item number 9.
Second.
Yeah, okay, great. And there's a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Okay, that's unanimous again. Thank you.
Move to adjourn?
No.
Second.
Not in order yet.
The meeting evaluation.
I'm going to do the meeting evaluation very slightly differently this time, because last time was the first time we did this. This is a chance for board members to say stuff about, what worked well about the meeting that we'd like to, learn from, what didn't go so well that we'd like to learn from, and anything that was, a follow-up work that we want to make sure gets said out loud that wasn't said out loud before. The only change I'm going to make on this is that I'm going to go first to give you guys something to think about. Okay, just chaired another meeting. What do I think? Leo made a very wise suggestion to me during the recess that these things are okay, but you need to have 2 of them so that if you're in the middle of the sand when one person's done, you don't have to wait for it to run through before you start timing the next person. So I would think it's very wise, and I will take that under advisement and look for another minute timer. But otherwise, I thought that this wasn't a huge meeting with lots of resident comments. We didn't really get a, super deep test of that. But I'm so far okay with the 2 minutes, 2-minute version. What else? I agree that the conversation about the annual town meeting was very useful. I'm glad we did it, and that we did it before the goal setting. It was long and tiring because it was the last thing on our agenda, but I still think it was worthwhile. But I'd be curious about comments about that. What else? So I think at some point we should have an update specifically about the Barron decision, the Southborough decision, as it's called sometimes. We're learning more and more about it. As I said, we had this MMA webinar today. There's another webinar in a week that's about how to manage, sort of unruly or abusive comments. Sort of the social psychology and the how to deal. So I think I'd like to learn that, and then at some point after that, I would consult with John and maybe, get some input from town council, and this also might relate to the conversation about code of conduct. So I think all those things together belong at a future agenda. That's what I got. Well, next time, bring a bottle of water. Okay, just a comment, a note to myself to hopefully I'll remember to do that next time. Let's start at one end. Any comments?
I don't have any comments that I haven't already shared. Thank you.
Nothing for me either.
Okay.
I have no comments.
Helpful comment, thank you.
So I think our discussion about, some of the existing laws, rules, and regulations, we probably need a refresh at some point. And I think it's probably been more than a year since we had town council out here doing open meeting law training, public records law training. So I'm sure that it's probably about time to do that. So I'd suggest that as a point for the chair and for the town manager to look about scheduling that. And I think, then the decision that we'll need to make is that, do we do that in conjunction with rolling out any new code of conduct that council might approve, or whether we do the OML and public records law first and then follow up with the code of conduct. But I think those are some things that, probably in the September, October timeframe, when more board and committee members are available, we should look at rolling that out.
Thanks. And those of you out in the vast public, if you got any comments about the meeting, send me an email or give me a call. Thanks.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. It's not debatable. All those in favor, please say yes or aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No, we're unanimous on that. We're out of here.